Hi. I decided to film this as a video, once because I wanted to respond to the actual YouTube video, and two, just because it's easier for me to talk through it than to type, which is probably says something about me. But anyhow, I watched a video today about this guy saying, what was it like to be in Disney World on 9/11? And he was 8 at the time. And I wanted to respond to him and tell him that I too was at Disney World on 9/11. However, I was 24 at the time, so my experience was probably quite a bit different from his, even though we went through the same thing. Both were in the Magic Kingdom that day. He talked about being at Chef Mickey's and then kind of things just being weird when they got to the park. Uh, I was there with my parents, and we had started out the morning just eating breakfast in our camper and uh, having the news on in the background. We weren't trying to get there at rope drop or something because we were all adults and just not that interested on our vacation of rushing around like that. So we had the news on, and they said, when we're going to come back, we have some news about the World Trade Center. And I remember thinking about the World Trade Organization. I think because they'd had some protest in town about a meeting not too long ago for that. And I thought, are they meeting at the Trade Center today? Is there a protest or something? And then it came back and they said a plane had crashed into the building. And I just kept thinking, that doesn't make sense. It's kind of funny because I saw a clip on TikTok about Sully and the plane into the Hudson, and that was my conviction at that point was something weird's got to happen because an American pilot would have taken the plane down into the harbor or into the river rather than into the tallest building around. Like they would have tried to miss it. And so that just was that. And you're like, how are they going to evacuate? And just standing there and going, oh my God, like trying to process it all. And as you do that, watching the second plane hit. And it was just a moment of shock. And I remember coming and, my mom came in from taking out the trash and you said something and just, what's going on? And so we just watched the news probably for the next hour trying to figure out. Um, I worked for an insurance company at the time. Um, I knew several of our brokers and intermediaries had offices in the Twin Towers. I had been kind of impressed when I started working there because growing up, I have Sweet Valley High books and Sugar and Spice where they the main characters went to New York and the Twin Towers were either on the cover or on, someplace they went. And that was like the real center of business, not like, this random insurance company in Cincinnati. So I remember being impressed and I remember worrying about them and wondering, what in the world was happening with them. People we knew got out, but most of the casualties that day are from Marcia McClellan and Aon. And on the anniversary, I know the firefighters and so many other people gave so much. But I think about them because there was one story about two women who got out because after the first plane hit, these two were in the second tower and her coworker was so shaken up and she said, let's go downstairs, get something to eat, a cup of coffee. And because they did and they went down, they were below the line when the second plane hit. And just the idea of going to work and saying that to a coworker, just it takes me about 5 seconds to imagine myself in her shoes. And so just the tragedy of the day gets to me. But then, that was what happened. I remember we were sitting there watching and it looked like the tower swayed. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, no, it's the World Trade Center. It can't fall down. which now looking back, you're like, my gosh, that was, of course it could fall down. It's a building, you know? So that is just the craziness of the morning. And like I said, we watched for a little while and then they say, what else are we going to do? We might as well go over to the parks. It's not helping anyone to go back over there. So we went over to get the boat to the Magic Kingdom. I remember a couple was sitting on the beach and they were kind of like, what's going on? And my dad said, the Afghans took down the building. It's like, okay, Dad, that's probably not, you know. And it's like, well, no, they don't know exactly yet, but it does look like it's terrorism. And so we went over to the park. And, this was our third day at the park. We had come down on Saturday to see the Night of Joy, which I'll end the story with. But we were going there, and so it was third day we're going there, and we're going to the Magic Kingdom. Oh, well, we had been telling people, hey, you're seeing these people on their phones. I mean, come on, can you not be off your phone while you're at Disney World? 20 years later, right? Beyond it. But so we had been noticing that in the past days. And we went in and we went to the left. I had read at some point that's how you avoid the lines, right? So we went to the left. We went on the Aladdin's Magic Carpet. And we went on, I don't know, Dumbo. We're just working our way around the park. I remember going to Pirates of the Caribbean and being freaked out about it because they're showing this navy attacking this town. And I just kept thinking, is there a navy out there that's getting ready to sail into New York Harbor and attack? And and there's some points now where I was like, well, no, because, we have radar or something. This can't be happening. But at the same time, having no clue what was going on, that it didn't seem that outlandish. And so we continued our way around and we went to go over to Tom Sawyer's Island. They're like, no, the ride's down. So we're like, okay. We go to the Haunted Mansion and they're like, no, it's closed. And at that point, we're kind of like, And it kind of something that's like, okay, at this point, they're kind of saying, hey, the park's closed. The park's closed. So we start to go that way. Rumors are flying at that point. There's another plane, the Capitol, the State Department, the Pentagon, maybe there's a car bomb, and just trying to figure out what in the world happened. So we took my dad's cell phone and he called his parents, and I called my mom's mother. I don't know, to just say, hey, we're all right and we're headed back. And yeah, they were just funneling mass people out of the park, but it was very orderly. But they started to that, what could be another symbol of America but crashing a plane into all these American tourists at Cinderella's castle? It didn't seem that crazy that we could do. So, you know, they got us all out. I still have a free day at the park. I don't know if they would ever honor from the coupon that they gave at the time. But they put us on, the boat back to the campground. And I remember sitting on the edge, like hugging my knees, because trying to take up as little space as possible so they could fit as many people on. And as we're riding back, there's one woman who's complaining, well, why are we being sent there? I just enjoy the day at the park. And the only thing I could think of was because if they attack the park, the bodies are going to be easier to count if you're at the hotel you're registered at. And kind of not knowing whether or not I believe that thought, but, not knowing what was happening next. And then I was sitting there hugging my knees and thinking, we're at war. Like, we're going to have to go to war over this. And I'm 24. Who did I know in school that enlisted in the military? And trying to go through different names because there's a few, and just thinking, my God, just protect them because I don't know what's going to happen to them in the coming weeks, months, years. experience, but we got back to the camper and just turned on the TV and kind of watched. My parents went for a walk at one point, and I tried to call to work, which they'd all been sent home for the day, and they didn't know anything more than I did about what was happening in New York. So did that and just watched it, and I just remember wanting to hear from the president what was going to happen next. That just I needed that. We tried to go to dinner, but the one buffet that was open was like $40 a person, and it's like I'm just gonna make hot dogs back at the camper. Just not in the mood to do that. And we kind of just stayed there all night. We had a small camper at that time, and so then the next day we went back to the parks, um, and we stayed there. Now we were supposed to leave Saturday morning, but Thursday night when we came back, they had a notice on the door, just to kind of be aware because there is a hurricane coming and they might be evacuating us in the next day or so. Um, so we went to bed, and I know I certainly did not sleep hardly at all that night. Every time I fell asleep, I had horrible dreams. About 5 a.m., I could hear my parents talking in bed about, should we just leave or what to do or, keep down because Lori's still asleep. And I'm like, Lori's not been asleep for much of it. Don't worry about it. And it was kind of like, if we want to get up and start packing up now and head home, that would be great. Uh, and we pretty much did. They refunded us the night there. One less person to avert about evacuating. And the sun came out when we hit the Georgia line, which pretty much confirmed my parents' suspicion that it wasn't ever good when we went to Florida for vacation because they'd had some bad experiences there in the past of just crappy weather, I think a broken leg, just never a good vacation. And so we had that. Um, so yeah. Um, so couple things. The guy who did the video mentioned rental cars and everything. And one thing I know is when I got back, one of our claim adjusters had been with a lawyer in Texas, and she had a rental car. And as they're trying to figure everything out, and he called and they're just like, yeah, and he dropped her off at her house, which was a couple hours from where they were, and they just authorized that, you know what, just drive back to Cincinnati as you can, and drop the car off at the airport rental car, and we'll pay whatever charges, and the rental car company can figure out where the car belongs after that. um, I reimbursed his expenses, and I there wasn't a problem on our end with that, but I'm sure there was many others. Um, but so that was my experience. But as I said, the one thing I will end with, and if you ever listen to Christian music, Michael W. Smith has talked about that his first worship album came out on 9/11. And I remember that because I had pre-ordered it. And we got down there, we kind of rushed down there so that because I wanted to go see Night of Joy, which was a Christian concert. Hold on one second. Google, stop. And we ended up seeing Jars of Clay plus one and Michael W. Smith between Cinderella's Castle and over by Space Mountain. Kind of had to go come back. It was raining, but Spirit Song Ichthus, a concert in the rain. I was like, it's not pleasant, but I was fully in my wheelhouse. So I was like, okay. And my parents, who are of course old, right? They were not fond of the volume of the music, but Kings Island has exceptionally loud concerts, I will swear to. So I was like, whatever. But I did notice the two college guys in front of me who were covering their ears, so maybe they weren't quite as wrong as I was thinking. But we had to move from, like, say, one stage to the next. And I grabbed my mom's hand and was like, grab onto dad, and we're going. I'm snaking through the crowd as what I've learned to do at Ichthus over the years, or Spirit Song. And my mom was watching all the other groups do that too, and how all the other groups stayed together and watched out for each other. And that was one of her takeaways from the week, was how much the students cared for each other and watched over each other. And she's like, they're not like these horrible teens that we see on the news or whatever, that these are good kids, and that gives her hope for the future, that there will be good kids and good people going forward. And so I will leave it at that. But that is my experience of being a 24-year-old at Disney World on 9/11.